Hi, Kat.
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Everybody will join back together and we'll break the internet. Yeah, but so I think
Sorry.
It works.
It's a moment to be kind of documenting where we're at and how did we adapt? How did we adapt during COVID-19, right? How did we stay connected in a meaningful way? Awesome. Oh, so with that, let's dive in. My name is Taraneh. I'm the director of Be the Change Collective, and I get to be your moderator today. The name of this panel is called Staying Balanced, Mental Health and Regulating the Nervous System. So whether we have a yoga practice or not, we all have a lot of different practices that we're taking on to stay balanced right now. And the folks that we're bringing on this panel have been leaders, teachers, guides in our community and beyond, and really have cultivated expertise around this work of staying regulated for mental and emotional health, for self-care, and for community care. So it's with that we dive into this panel, really just meant to help have a discussion about what our resources can be to stay well during these times. So I will start by sharing the bio for Eboni. Eboni is a conscious facilitator. Eboni combines her self-proclaimed Midwest sweetness with grounding practices that invite the soul into presence. Illuminating the interconnection between inner and outer worlds, she uses simple sensory cues and self-inquiry to provide accessible experiences in unconventional spaces. Welcome, Eboni.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Mark Tanaka. Mark Tanaka is a teacher of yoga, meditation, qigong, and an instructor at Luminous Awareness Institute School for Energy Medicine. He also has a private practice guiding people in their body and somatic-based emotional healing process. Through all the mediums of his teaching, Mark emphasizes the importance of regulating and calming the body and nervous system through utilizing various tools and approaches. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least, Nicole Steward. Nicole Steward is a social worker, MSW, homeless foster youth liaison, and certified yoga instructor with a focus on community engagement, public education, and trauma-informed yoga. With more than 2 decades of social work practice in nonprofits and accountability work in K-12 education, Nicole has noticed the need for a trauma-informed lens in the worlds of social services and education to better help us understand the needs of those we serve. Nicole also believes self-care is a radical tendency we must adopt if we are to discharge the toxic stress we absorb through our work and sustain ourselves as service providers, educators, and human beings. In addition to her day job, Nicole teaches yoga mindfulness and offers trauma-informed self-care workshops and retreats. A quote that drives her forward in her work is by Leela Watson. "If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." Welcome, Nicole.
Yay.
What a beautiful quote to dive into this work together. So first question on this panel is really, we're in unprecedented times, right? And collectively, no doubt, we're experiencing a wide range of reactions. A lot of traumas could be brought up either from past or new traumas being created. And I'm sure that these are surfacing in a lot of different ways, just depending on the individual's experience and location, right, within this pandemic. So no doubt our nervous systems, regardless of who and where we are carrying a lot. And I know for me personally, there's times I've found myself dysregulated without even realizing it, you know, like, oh, wait, wow, I'm really moving from a place of fear and nervousness. And it's just to be expected with all this uncertainty. And each of you are really connected to your communities as leaders and as guides. And so I'm curious about what patterns you have noticed, and if you could speak to the role that the nervous system regulation has in supporting our mental and emotional health during these times.
Yeah, so one pattern working in mental health that I've seen a lot of is folks losing their sense of self. And that comes with loss of a routine. It comes from loss of certainty or whatever normal is for folks. And that can be like a very disorienting feeling. That being said, you know, moving towards regulating the nervous system helps us find that baseline again. That new sense of normal can come from a place of being in our bodies and knowing that that much is okay and that much is safe. And then we can move into more unifying experiences that give us abilities to sink into our community and even in nature, where we have a sense of being part of something greater, even if we don't know quite where we fit in it yet.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you, Eboni, for kind of painting that progression. And would either of our panelists like to jump in from there? That's a beautiful start off.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I totally concur with the uncertainty piece. Everyone I talk to, I think that's coming up big time. And when there's a lot of uncertainty, I think everyone gets stressed. And also change is, I think, fundamentally stressful. So between the combination of those two things, I believe that a lot of people are experiencing stress in one way or another. And I think from there, when we are stressed, one of the first places where we unconsciously reach for regulation is, into our habits, right? So I think it's a really interesting time, because what I find with my clients is that, a lot of us are discovering what our coping mechanisms are really intensely. They're being highlighted. We're either stuck with ourselves, so we're just doing our coping mechanism over and over and over and over, and either driving ourselves crazy or getting sick of it, or we're reaching in our relationship really intensely, and the pattern there in terms of how we can't regulate or how we attempt to regulate is being exposed to. So all of that, I think, is really exposing a lot in regards to our relationship to regulation. And so I think it's a really cool opportunity to look at that. And what's really cool right now these days is that the idea of nervous system regulation is something we're talking about. It's becoming more common knowledge. And I think it's a really great place to focus. And the reason why is because it's a great way to talk about how we deal with what we're dealing with, which is stress. That's what it comes down to. Like, how are we coping? What's our habits? How do we regulate? How does that work? What works? What doesn't work? We really need to be looking at that. And also, as a yoga community, for me, I changed a lot of my yoga classes and my approach about 8 years ago, where I went from, trying to do all these fancy things with yoga to, okay, how do I get people calm? Just baseline, especially, right? Being in Silicon Valley, we've been dealing with stress at, I think, at a pretty high level in general. So you have all these people that are really stressed out, where then I started to look at, okay, what can we do to regulate? And there's a lot in our yoga practice and our meditation that I think could really lend to nervous system regulation. So there's something that happens in our practice when we actually make that the focus, if that makes sense. Because I think working out is great, getting flexible is great, all that stuff's great, improving our spirituality is a wonderful thing. They all contribute. But when we really hone in on, okay, what's happening in our nervous system in our practice? What's the after effect? How is it impacting our general state? And when we really emphasize that and really design our practice around that, something really profound happens. And the last thing I'll say, just quoting Stephen Porges, founder of the polyvagal theory, is that, our behavior comes from our state, right? If that makes sense. So a lot of the things that we're compulsively doing, a lot of our actions are coming from our state of being. So when we're managing our state of being on a regular basis through something like meditation, therapy, using our social engagement route, connection mechanisms in a healthy way to keep ourselves calm, then it's going to put us in a better place to deal with what we're dealing with collectively. Right? So, thank you.
Beautifully said. And I guess I can kind of tie in together all of those things, because ditto. I think first for me is just to frame what's currently happening now. And I think initially I was using the term, we're experiencing a global trauma, but I've actually pulled that back a little bit. We are experiencing a global stress, and for some of us it is traumatic. And I think that nuance is important, as we all are, in this together, but also having very different experiences and being able to validate that. Because I think, to Ebony's point of that loss of self, for some of us, we are, initially, I also see these as cycles of grief, and it's in a nice little circle, but it looks more like that. How we experience those 7 stages of grief, shock and denial being the first 2 that some people are still stuck in, and then kind of the acceptance or anger first, and some people are stuck there, and then we get to acceptance and bargaining. And I think everyone's at different stages of that, maybe from day to day, hour to hour. But if we're not aware of what those stages are or how that shows up for us, we may not understand what's happening. And I do think that's why it's really important that we bring in that nervous system conversation, so people can understand, why do I feel this way, or why am I experiencing this? Some of the patterns I'm seeing right now are a wave of exhaustion hitting now from all of the adrenaline and anxiety and uncertainty and clinging to what was. I think people are realizing, it's been a month for many of us in shelter in place at this point, maybe even longer. Who knows what time is anymore? And that, I think, is impacting our waves, kind of. And it's different for everybody, like I said, but I'm noticing this week in particular, folks are in a state of exhaustion and numbness from all of the kind of tension of the fight or flight response. I am also seeing patterns in shifts of time. And I hear a lot of folks talking about this, how you don't know what day it is, what time it is, what the actual date, and recognizing how interesting that concept of time comes in when we are less busy and our vibrations are different. So recognizing, again, we're talking about this as a eternal pause, or a global pause. For many of us, and this goes to what Mark was saying about habits, for many of us, the things that we were doing to cope were really just other ways of being busy and distracting ourselves. And we don't have those ways to distract ourselves anymore. So now we're really sitting with who we are and who the other bodies in our home are in relation to us, and how we feel about those relations and those people and ourselves. And because we have this time of stillness and quietness, and I do mean that literally, right? The earth is literally vibrating less because we are not driving as much, we are not on trains as much, we're not flying as much, right? All of those things. So that's the challenge, that our bodies too, our lives were full of a cadence of busyness and vibration that has stopped, because that's where we are. And in that silence and in that stillness, things are going to come up. And that's when we will run to, like Mark said, to our habits and to our coping mechanisms. And that's also right now when we're realizing, oh, wait, that coping mechanism was just another distraction, right? I'll give an example, right? Happy hour, right? Sometimes for folks, after a long week, happy hour is a good distraction. But that is a different, we can't do that now. That doesn't work. But recognizing that that is a big shift for a lot of us. So this is some of the patterns I'm seeing are that loss of routine and timing, and I go to work at this time and I come home at this time and I make dinner at this time. And that's been shifting a lot of our, the way our nervous system was able to regulate before as well. So I know we're going to have a little bit more conversation about this, but recognizing this is a big change. Our bodies are used to creating routines and normalcy out of our routines, and any kind of change will throw us off. How long it throws us off and how intensely it throws us off, that's where the practices come in. That's where, what Mark was saying, that yoga, the meditation, the practices of stillness that we can pull in to kind of lessen that pain of the change, is kind of where our practice is.
Thank you, all 3 of you, for sharing that wisdom. I'm curious, before we dive into the next question, to hear from the community, because we talked a lot about, right, losing this sense of self, coping mechanisms, you know, falling into these different patterns, right? As we've lost kind of our routines that keep us on track, as Nicole was saying. So if any brave souls are open to sharing, like what are the challenges that you're facing right now, so that the next question is really around strategies, right? So do any of the community members just want to pop into the chat things that you're coping with, or maybe things you've noticed in your patterns that you're wondering, like, you know, is there a recommendation for how I can avoid falling into this coping pattern, falling into that reaching in your relationship for regulation, for example? I just want to give a moment for folks to chime in. What are the challenges we're facing? I'm seeing dust settling and recognizing more negative, self-defeating thought patterns, feeling alone, inner child healing with conscious parenting, feelings of motivation, but they cannot actually do what I need to do to make that work. Having a lot of time to be creative, finding ways to make it useful now. Laziness and lack of motivation, tired all the time, hard to feel refreshed, time to heal. Wow. I know for me, I saw myself in all of those. So thank you for the brave folks who shared. That's really vulnerable. And that's what makes this powerful. So with some of that, the next question is really, what are some of the self-care and mental and emotional health strategies that you can recommend for those of us who are seeking tools to stay balanced?
A big one for me has been dropping expectation and judgment. As simple as that sounds, I come back to it sometimes 100 times a day or 100 times in an hour. And it reminds me to be very gentle and forgiving of myself, because we can't expect ourselves to act one way or another. As you mentioned, we're in unprecedented times. So to expect ourselves to come out of this with a six-pack or like a perfectly made wood table, or, you know, the things that a lot of people are striving for, it can sometimes be damaging if we put too much weight into the expectations. So the first part is dropping that. And then just like being able to sink in to the uncertainty. And that is very simply said, but very difficult to actually get done. Again, another practice you have to drop into, you know, just notice when you're expecting things, whether it be to act a certain way, to feel a certain way. And, you know, that can be a very gratifying experience in itself. On the side of just taking care of yourself after you've dropped the expectation and judgment, I find being in nature incredibly restorative. We breathe air into our lungs, and our oceans pump through our blood vessels. I mean, we are cellularly connected to our earth. And so being in nature, when we lose our sense of self, gives us the ability to sink back in, to feel that we are part of something greater. And, you know, it takes the weight off of just having to deal with it alone. And the other part of that being, you know, sinking into community where you can. Virtual gatherings like this, I have my little grid view up right now, so I can see a couple cool tapestries and all your smiling faces. And it's just great to get together like this, you know, using the resources we have. One of our very own, Jessica, has Martha Street's garden area that she's had people come in and out of in a safe way, you know, but it's allowed folks to pay attention to the impact that we have when we're together. So
I love the things you just shared there, Ebony. Those were great. I love the nature piece. That's been huge for me. And I love that you spoke about just permissioning what's there to be there, because I think we're all going to be in really different spots. I imagine because so many of us have just been going for so many years without realizing it, this time of like suddenly stopping is a little bit of a shock in itself to the system. And for a lot of you, I would imagine you're exhausted. You're just fucking tired, you know, because you've just been going for so long and you don't realize it. And so then you're like, oh, I stopped. Okay, well, I chill for a week or 3 days or whatever. I better get on my projects. I have all these things I wanted to do, and you can't do them. And it's because you stopped and slowed down finally, and your body's saying, slow the fuck down. We're not done, right? Just chill. And I just want to create permission for that if you're going through that, because some of you might be experiencing that. Just give yourself more time. Maybe you'll take these whole 2 months just relaxing. But I promise that if that's what you really need and you do that, when you get to the other side, it's going to be really profound. And it's a really amazing opportunity to actually give yourself some time to do that. Because for some of us, we just haven't had the opportunity to do that or the circumstances to do that, where in this moment, you're being sort of forced to do that, right? So that could be really, really profound. Now, that could be one thing. And for some of you, you might also be experiencing some freeze, right? And so we've talked a lot, and I know a lot of people probably heard about fight and flight, right? And then the restore. But one of the modes of the nervous system that's rarely talked about is the freeze mechanism, right? Have you guys heard of that? So it's what's called the dorsal vagal component of the parasympathetic and vagus nerve system. And it's basically when you get overwhelmed, when you get too stressed, when you're too overloaded, your system just shuts down, right? So you see this in nature when like a deer is being chased, and if they get caught, they know they're done, their system will just turn off. You know? So for some of you, you might be experiencing a certain level of freeze. And if that's happening, actually doing a little bit of movement and doing a little bit of exercise, getting some energy moving could be really helpful. As well as I really want to emphasize the importance of social regulation. And here's one of the main reasons why regulation is so important, is that the difference for me between trauma and stress is that when you actually can get regulated, meaning when you can eventually find yourself back to a calm and connected place, it doesn't become trauma. Does that make sense? Trauma happens when you get hit by some sort of traumatic event or stress, and when you can't recover, so you use a compensation mechanism in your body mind to deal with it, but it doesn't resolve it fully, and it gets stored in the system. And that's where you get stuck in that compensation behavior, right? If that makes sense. So for example, for a lot of us, most of us, we had this in early childhood. So let's say that you were really stressed out, your family was going through chaos, you know, your whole family was overloaded, everyone was stressed out, no one was paying attention to you. So then you got really stressed out and you got overwhelmed and you had to check out and numb out as a way to deal, right? So when that gets hardwired, then your system tends to numb out as a way of coping with stress. Does that make sense? Which is actually a little different from fully coming back down, which would have happened possibly if there was an adult that was calm and regulated and they came over and connected with you and were like, hey, I see that you're stressed out. I'm calm. It's going to be okay. Here, hold my hand. And they would track your nervous system. And if they helped you calm down, your system would learn how to regulate itself over time with the repetition of it. Right? Does that make sense to people? Kind of, right? So we need these regulating experiences, and connecting socially, I think, is a really important component on one level. And also having people in the community who know how to regulate themselves and regulate each other is a really important skill set that we just need to build as a community as a whole, because we're coming from generations and generations of traumatized parents and people where we lost the art of co-regulation and self-regulation. So, you know, even though I'm selling yoga and qigong and meditation, which is really great, I think the really important component I really want to emphasize, which I do a lot in my personal practice when I work with people one-on-one, is the co-regulation, the social regulation component. For us to really explore that and study that, because what I found is that it's something you can also even do on Zoom, right? Because my whole practice, I had to move on to Zoom in the last month, and I've been working with people and I've been getting amazing results, because it's something like presence and care and love and attention is something that you can transmit across the phone, right? Across Zoom, across the screen. So later when we do practices, I'll talk a little bit more about that and guide you through some of these skill sets so we can build them. Right. Thank you.
What they've both shared, and kind of take off on what Mark was saying about regulation. And that's probably the biggest challenge right now, especially for those of you who are parents, is that, or have another body in your house with you at all, that some of us have to be regulated for the others of us in our families. And it doesn't mean we have to hold everything for that, but we just have to recognize that our regulation impacts the regulation of our kids or our animals or our partners, right? And that is a level of a responsibility when you are in community with other people. To Mark's point about having regulated folks around you so that you can pull into that co-regulation. But I think it's also important when we talk about regulation, sometimes that feels really big, or it feels like you would have to do something very intensive to regulate a system that is thrown off by change or stress or trauma. But remembering what Eboni shared with us, like, we are connected to nature in a very dismembered way right now. And part of that is the pace of our busyness and our industrialization. You know, I'm reading a few different books from Indigenous writers on how we heal moving forward, because I have a feeling they know what they're talking about. And I've been reading this book by Malidoma Patrice Somé on ritual. If you get some folks that were in my radical self-care talk, we kind of went through this and talked a little bit about it. But he talks a lot about the difference between indigenous cultures and industrialized cultures, is that in indigenous cultures, there are no machines between their gods and them. And in our culture, the machines are our gods, right? We're all on one. We have this, we have a television, and we are in an industrialized, mechanized world. That mechanization, that industrialization creates a different rhythm. And then in order for us to be plugged into this world, we have to join the rhythm of industrialization, right? We have to be busy, we have to go, we have to work 9 to 5 or 6 to 12 or whatever that looks like, go, go, go. And again, right now, that has all stopped very quickly, and without our control of it, that busyness, that go, 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 that industrial pace and rhythm has gone. And that's part of what's, I think, causing a lot of the grief and the stress and the loss that folks are feeling. It's WTF, like, that was a very different rhythm of our lives, and then we all got sat down for a minute. For some of us who've been practicing the sitting down for a minute or 45 at a time or whatever that looks like, right? In our yoga practices and our meditation practices, this is a familiar rhythm that we are able to pull into in a way that can be restorative. For people who haven't and who have been using mechanisms of other busyness, that this is a big shock to the system. And to Mark's point, right, like, we have a window of tolerance, right, in which we can experience ups and downs and then come back to a level of a baseline in our nervous system. When we experience something that's too much for us, we get into a hyper mode, right? And those are those of us who feel very productive and we're going and we're on the 17 Zoom calls a day, and right, we're on that hypo or hyper, right? And then there is, kind of to Mark's point of that freeze response, the hypo. That's the, I can't get off of my couch, I'm gonna binge a Netflix marathon. I don't want to go to the grocery store, but I eventually have to. I don't want to leave the house, right? And those things aren't wrong. Those are just the ways that we kind of get pulled out of our window of tolerance at times. When we build in practices of stillness or movement, right? It's whichever we need in the moment. If we're hypo, we need practices of movement to get back to baseline. If we're hyper, we might need some stillness and some rest to come back. And that might change from day to day and hour to hour, right? So you might need to sleep in till 10, but then when you get up, be productive for 2 hours. And actually, Kat, you posted, when you did your takeover of the Be the Change thing, you posted a little breakdown, like blocking of time, like work for 50 minutes and take a 15-minute break, work 40 minutes, take a 15-minute break. And just that concept of being able to parse out our time in a way can be very helpful to pull us back into that. So one of the practices that we can do that can be helpful is to try to bring in a sense of control, knowing that we can't control anything, right? But try to bring a sense of control in the ways that we are awake and together with other people. So creating a bit of a schedule that can be flexible, right? I'm not suggesting people get up at 7 in the morning and work till 5 or anything like that, but creating some level of a schedule for yourself. Even if it's, I'm going to sleep till 10, I'm going to get up and go to the grocery store, and then I'm going to you eat and then take a walk, and then I'm going to go to bed, right? Like, it doesn't have to be any kind of schedule, but something that will work for you. And then my perception of it is that we have to gain back a little bit of the rhythm that industrialization has taken from us. And this is a beautiful opportunity to do that. I want to be very careful because I'm talking about an opportunity in a time of crisis. And I want to be very clear that there is a lot of pain and death and fear and very real trauma going on around this. So I want to put an asterisk by the word opportunity, yeah, just so it's in context. That said, we have an opportunity to readjust and regulate to a new rhythm. And to Eboni's point, like being outside and listening to the wind in the trees, even if you're just in your neighborhood. You know, I don't have a yard, I have a little patio, but just going out on my patio and feeling the sun on me and watching the birds, right? That's a different rhythm. If you're able to take a walk, I know my cousin Jen, who's on here, mentioned going to the barn and being with her horses. Being with animals is a different rhythm. Being with water is a different rhythm. Being with trees is a different rhythm, right? Even earthing, getting your feet on the ground, on the grass, right? That creates a different rhythm in our body that is much more natural to who we are as humans. And this is a really beautiful opportunity for us to get back into that rhythm so that when we go back to whatever this is going to look like, we may maybe push back a little bit on the rhythm of busy, 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 right? That burnout culture, the industrialization, and go, go, go. Multitasking, what is that even, right? My hope is that there will be a big shift around that, but I don't know if you are consuming any news, you might be noticing that there are folks wanting to get us back to that rhythm. Like, we got to get back to work. We got to make money. Well, you guys got to make money for them, right? But we got to get back to that rhythm because people are losing money. It's not about who we are and how we show up as humans. Let's go back to what we were doing because there are people that need to eat and buy their yachts. Sorry, digress. But recognizing, though, that is a protective thing for us is if we can pull into a rhythm, a more natural rhythm. And if we can do that right now, and this is the way our practices work, right? Mindfulness, meditation, yoga, qigong, all these practices work by we practice on the mat and we embody certain emotions and feelings, right? We embody strength, we embody courage, we embody rest, whatever that looks like, so that we can take that out into the world. Right now is a beautiful opportunity for us to practice a different rhythm, whatever that feels like for us. Again, if you're hypo, maybe that rhythm is walking every day or listening to music and doing a 2-minute, dance off or something. If you're hyper, maybe it is doing rest or a yin yoga practice or yoga nidra or taking a nap, right? Whatever that looks like for you and your nervous system, if we practice that now in a time when we have the ability to do that, when we go back to whatever we're going back to or whatever we're moving forward to, we will have that resource to pull into because we know what that rhythm feels like in our bodies, in our bones, in our breath, right? So that's, I think, a really important practice right now. Also around ritual. This is a whole other conversation, but again, to that point of, speed is a way to prevent ourselves from having to deal with something we don't want to face. And in this book, he says, to be able to face our fears, we must remember how to perform ritual. And to remember how to perform ritual, we have to slow down. And now, ceremonial rituals and community, like tribal rituals, are very specific and done in a very intentional way. But we can take this ritual concept into our daily lives. And basically anything that we do in our day, whether it's a routine or not, if we can bring our presence, our awareness, and our intention to that activity, it can become a ritual. So, we were talking a little bit about, when you make your tea in the morning or your coffee or your whatever it is you're making in the morning, right? Or your lemon water, whatever it is. We, when we're busy, we just do that. We make it, we go. If we can bring a little intentionality and presence to that process of making our tea, and we smell it before we put it in, we feel the warmth of the water and the steam on our face, we put the tea bag in, we watch the color dissolve as the tea bag, right? Taking that really slow digestive process, because we got the time, can really give us a sense of control whatever that feels like in our bodies, in our nervous systems, and a sense of time placement, if that makes sense, right? Because again, right now, time is, what is time? Who knows what day it is, what time it is, that kind of thing. So bringing that back into our nervous system in a way that is familiar to what we used to have, but without the busyness, can be a way for us to settle our nervous system now and build some practices and resources we can use for whatever the future looks like.
Thank you. From each of you, I think there's been so much context that we've been really given for our experience. And I know for me, context is really useful when it comes to permissioning myself and my experience, right? We can't take one behavior, one coping mechanism, one feeling out of context of this bigger thing we're experiencing individually, interpersonally, culturally, collectively, systemically.
Yeah. And I do want to just add, because I saw something in the comments about a good day or a bad day. And I think to Eboni's point of expectation and loss of control, really just remembering each day is a day, right? What is good? What is bad? It's subjective. If you survived it and you got through the end of the day breathing, it's a day. And I'd say a good day. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard or uncomfortable or challenging. It doesn't mean you're not going to cry or your kid's not going to have a tantrum, right? And I think that's really important because we are kind of conditioned for that, right? Like today was a good day, today's a bad day. I'm having a good mood, I'm in a bad mood. They're just moods, they're just feelings, they're just days. Lots of them strung together.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you for speaking to that too. And I think in the spirit of ritual, embracing that this here is a ritual, all of us together on Zoom. Yeah. We never imagined our rituals would be like this, right? But this is a ritual. This is an opportunity for community co-regulation. I know especially for, I'm seeing comments about those of us who are alone, right? And we don't have another body to co-regulate or dysregulate or anything with, right? So before we dive into this last question with our last 10 minutes, I'll invite us to take a deep breath together. So just kind of feeling your body and letting all of that land and connecting down with the bottom half of your body, your belly, your chest. And we'll take a deep inhale and a full exhale. Cool. So we've kind of started to move in this direction, and I appreciate what Nicole mentioned about talking about opportunity sensitively in these times. But with such massive changes occurring, and a lot of us being reminded of what's most important and what's most precious to us, saw something about that in our comments too. What are some of the collective resilience opportunities that you envision arising from this experience? So we're now kind of moving into a space of possibility, right? A little bit of imagination. I want to acknowledge that and to celebrate each of your individual unique perspectives and space for that. So briefly, since we have 10 minutes, yeah, what is an opportunity you're envisioning?
Nicole said something so beautifully earlier, and I had to like do the church wave because it really got to me. It really did. And some of us are the regulators of our emotional surroundings. And a lot of us have that spiritual pull. And I think it's more of us than we actually might know. And so stepping into a space where we regulate our own systems, we recognize what gifts we bring. And to that point, I mean, we're in a space where now when we go to the store, we have to really even just think like there's so much weight with you just being somewhere. You know, the things you're bringing with you from home on a level of your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings, but also, you know, the sense of of doing your work at home, being able to sanitize things and show up in ways that keep others safe, wearing your protective equipment. So in that sense, we have this incredible opportunity to really take a moment and look at the way we show up with people and the weight of that. Another thing we have to look at here is the weight of our choices, and that goes into how we buy our food, how we spend time with one another, where those places are. And that can be a very empowering experience. It can make us all much greater leaders in our own lives, in our own right. And that can look very different in different parts of the community, but it ends up allowing us to have experiences that are more closely tied to what our own regulation is. And with us being such an integral part of the earth and interconnected in ways that humans are, we can ground back into what's greater for the whole rather than just the individual. And so we come back to that true state of being that is part of something greater. So
thanks for sharing that. How many people in this group would consider yourself a helper or a healer? How many of you, are moms and hold them together a lot right now? So if you're open to it, just notice your body for a moment and notice the part of you that is the holder. Like, notice the part of you in your body that you feel is the person supporting other people. Maybe it's just even holding together all the stuff that's going on inside of you. Yeah. Can you guys feel that part of you? Is that there? You probably don't notice it because that's what you identify yourself with most of the times. It's like fish in water, right? But just notice that in you, the part of you that's like holding it together for other people, showing up for other people all day. And most likely that part of you is a little tired. It's a little strained. It's like a little bit dried up beef jerky-ish, right? And just notice that that part of you might need some support. And it might not be used to asking for support. Right? It might not be used to being even noticed by anybody, including yourself. So my challenge and or invitation to you is to actually notice that part of you and spend a fair amount of time. Now, I'm not talking like 2 minutes. I'm talking like half an hour a day or 15 minutes a day, but like regularly check in on that part of you, because that part of you is probably not going to tell you what it needs in the first day or two, maybe even, a week. Like, you have to check in with that part of you, build trust. And once you can let that part of you know that she matters, he matters, they matter, they might reveal to you what they need. And then from there, my challenge to you is to then get that need met, however you do that. So I think that's sort of the opportunity here, because if you don't do that, in times when there's increased stress, like that part will break, right? You're going to have a freak out. You're going to have a meltdown. Those things will happen. So how can we preemptively now take this opportunity to make sure we care for that part? Because most likely, if you have that tendency in your system, people are relying on you. You are a resource to other people on some level. And that's the part of you that you need to resource, that we need to resource, right? So that we can keep showing up. Because we're probably not going to just get out of that role anytime soon. It might be a lifetime role that we've stepped into as a healer or teacher. So yeah, that's my invitation here.
Thank you, Mark. And I will, again, build on the beautiful words of Eboni and Mark. I do think it's important to recognize that role as caregiver, whether it's just you and an animal in the house, or you and children, or you and a partner, or you and a roommate. Even if it is just you, recognizing that we are still connected to other people. So we still may be doing some caregiving and caretaking via text messaging and emails and phone calls. I do want to recognize briefly, there were two things that came up in the comments that I think should be named. And one was that some folks are completely alone, and that relationship is a rhythm that we pull into for self-care, having a night out with ladies, or, whether we're on a softball league, whatever that looks like. So being alone can be very overwhelming. And that's the beauty of this kind of a community where we can see each other, and we can't give hugs, which is really regulating, but being able to see each other also, just seeing all of these squares is really regulating for my nervous system right now. So recognizing that, but also, and someone also mentioned being triggered by like the people going out and seeing people in face masks, or seeing people sick, or things like that. So recognizing that some of this is us being triggered by things that we may not even know we're being triggered by, and that settles in the body in a certain way, in a certain place. So being able to take a little moment or two and really find out where that is in the body, kind of what Mark just asked us to do. Where am I feeling it right now in the body? It might be in the shoulders, it might be in the chest, the legs, the feet, my fingers are numb, whatever that looks like for you, and being able to attend to it. I think what's possible moving forward, which, there is a lot of uncertainty, and there can be plenty of fear when there's uncertainty. We don't have a guide or a model or any kind of leader, to be honest. My hope is that we do recognize how much we actually need each other, right? Because we give that a lot of lip service, but then we have this, right, this independent strain in our culture of, I'm got to do it for myself, and if nobody's with me, I'll go it alone. And the concept of independent entrepreneurship, right, where you're the only one that can do that thing, that can be really challenging as well. But recognizing that, like, we do actually all need each other, right? Even, I don't know, so there are people protesting the shutdowns, right? And they want to get back to work, and they're saying, we're not afraid of any virus. And, I heard one of the protesters saying, it's my choice if I want to get sick. It's my choice, it's my body if I want to get sick. And it's mine alone. And when he said that, I was like, oh, brother, like, here's the thing, right? Unless when you get sick, you are going to stay in your home and not involve any healthcare professionals, right? Or you're not going to go out to the grocery store, and you don't need anybody in the grocery store to buy your, to stock your food or to sell it to you, right? Like, total independence in our culture isn't, that's a lie. So, and I think that lie is being exposed now. Like, we absolutely all depend on each other, whether it's physical connection or not. And my hope is that we continue to remember this. We also continue to remember who the essential workers are in our culture, because many of those folks are also helpers and healers, and people that we don't necessarily hold in very high esteem, but maybe we'll start to. And my hope is that because we've had a time where we've had to find creative ways to stay connected, my hope is that we truly continue to build on the ways that we can connect with each other in community, in ways that, we can reach out. Because, and I did see someone else in the scroll talked about, sometimes I go to all my self-care tools and I'm still not in a place of regulation, right? And that's very real as well. And that's a good point to bring up, right? If you try something and it doesn't help in that moment, and you try another thing and it doesn't help, and another thing and it doesn't help, it doesn't mean you're broken. It just means that tool isn't working for you in that moment. And there's always an opportunity to reach out to someone else and ask for a tool, right? Because sometimes in our moments of need, our brain literally is in a fight or flight or freeze mode, right? So our amygdala is being captured, and our hippocampus, our way of remembering, is kind of literally taken offline. So it's hard for us in a moment of crisis to remember what we need. That's when it's really important for us to have a list. And I've been creating this list of resourcing, right? Internal and external resources, but really, and I know you guys can't see that, but really thinking about the external resources that we have, and those will have to be edited because we don't have the external outside resources that we used to have, right? So maybe one of your external resources is your couch, right? And when you lay on it, how do you feel? You feel relaxed, you feel held, right? You feel comfortable. Maybe it's comfortable sweater or a pair of socks that you can put on. And in that, when you have that on, that external support, you feel warmth and a sense of comfort, right? So external supports right now can be something, obviously, are going to be things that are in your home, making a list of those. And then making a list of internal supports. Your breath, right? And what happens when I focus on my breath? Maybe I feel more alive. Maybe I feel expansive, right? So I think maybe after this call, for those of you, if you're in a space of regulation, take some time to build a list of resources for yourself, both internal and external, so that you have them for when that moment comes when you're like, this is not okay, I need to get regulated, but what do I do? Pick that list up and, okay, my breath isn't working for me right now, let me try something else. Okay, the couch, nope, that's not an option right now, let me try something else. Oh, walk outside, that's what I need right now, let me go walk outside. And if I come back from that walk, well, let me back up. If during that walk I feel regulated, even if I come back from that walk and I'm right back to dysregulation, that worked in the moment, right? And we can hold on to that and know, okay, that is something that I can use as a tool to regulate for a period of time and then try something different. So my hope is that we will continue to build communities like this where we can share tools and resources so that all of us feel like we have a wealth of things to pull into and we never feel like we're stuck in any specific spot, especially right now when things are flowing and moving so rapidly day to day and hour to hour.
Thank you. Thank you so much, each of you, for all of the wisdom that you've shared and for really reminding us of our inner resources and our communal resources and just contextualizing so much for us in this moment. We are at 5:11. And Marty did bring up a topic about our sensual and sexual longings, and that is a juicy and necessary topic to talk about. And we are hoping to continue to have these gatherings on a monthly basis-ish, you know? So definitely like put down the things that you're feeling like you want to get heard around and what want to explore in community with, and we can add that to the list for future conversations as well as I'm seeing so much wisdom being shared across the chat from the folks here on this call. So I want to acknowledge everybody for that. And we are going to transition into our practice time together. So Eboni, Mark, and Nicole are each going to lead us through a 10-minute practice so that we can kind of get into our bodies, into our experience of regulation. So take a minute to do what you need to do.